So I'm going to start off by kind of setting the framework of what is the J1 Exchange Visitor Program. So the J1 program was actually created um, in the aftermath of World War II and the destruction that ensued. And the Congress and leaders in the Department of State thought, well, if you have people communicating on a personal basis, that there will be less likelihood for such, turmoil in the future. So that was kind of the backbone or the premise behind the J1 Exchange Visitor Program. And the full title actually is the J1 Educational and Cultural Exchange Program. And I put on this slide the pertinent words that speak to what the program is about, which is to increase mutual understanding between people of the United States and people of other countries by means of educational and cultural exchange. So, we'll refer back to this during today's PowerPoint presentation because I think you really want to use this as the basis of how decisions are made, why the program requires and regulations require certain things within for J1 exchange visitors. So again, this kind of lays the groundwork for the J1 program. And Jeremy, do you want to talk about this or want me to continue?
No, I mean, continue for a couple slides. And
Okay.
I also want to say to everybody, we only have about 30, like 25 of us here. So you can raise your hand or you can put a question in the Q&A box if you want, and we can answer as it goes on, or we can address the question. So feel free to put things in the Q&A.
Okay. So, just to follow up on this particular side, so obviously it says it's intended for temporary exchange of foreign nationals to the United States. So that's why it can't be used for a permanent staff position. It cannot be used for tenure track positions. And you go back to that first slide, it's a temporary cross-cultural educational exchange opportunity. So people come in, but then the Department of State says, go back. We want people to come in, learn their skill set, meet Americans, impart some of their culture to Americans, but then bring that back to their home country to share with their fellow countrymen. Thus, the whole premise of exchange. It is administered. It being the J1 program is administered by the Department of State. And it has designated the University of Pennsylvania as a J1 program sponsor. And it's the technical part is also overseen by CVIS, which is the Student Exchange Visitor Information System. So that is also overseen by the Department of Homeland Security, and it's from that database that we issue the immigration documents, the DS 2019 in particular. And it's also where information, biographic information, information germane to what the J1 is doing in the United States, that is what is reflected in each of their CVIS records. Okay, so some things that you want to consider if you are entertaining or thinking about hosting someone in J1 sponsor and visa status is, first and foremost, what is their immigration history? Have they been in the United States previously? If so, for how long? Were they here previously as a J1, an H1, and F1? What are their credentials? Do they have a minimum of a bachelor's degree? Because for a research scholar and professor category of the J1 program, you need a minimum of a bachelor's degree in the related field of which the J1 exchange visitor is going to be undertaking their research topic in. They have to have adequate financial support, whether that's from Penn, whether it's from their home institution or a third-party entity. They have to show that as part of the application process. Another important requirement of the J1 program per the federal regulations is health insurance coverage that meets these specific levels required by the US government per the regulations. So if they're coming in on a J1 as a postdoc, for example, the postdoc plan offered by the university does indeed meet those requirements. If they're coming in self-funded or on a third party's funding as a visiting scholar, let's say, then they are instructed by our office to purchase insurance through the Gallagher Health Insurance System, or if they have alternate insurance that again meets the requirements per the J1 federal regulations, they are free to use that instead. Um, Important thing, that second to last bullet, there really has to be a maintenance of the primary intent for which the J1 came to the United States in the first place. So they can't come in and say, well, I'm working on this research topic, but now I want to kind of move to a different department or work on something else. That is kind of goes against the logic of the J1 program, right? So going back again to that first slide, they're coming in to do a specific activity. They're going to wrap up that activity and bring it back to their home country. It's not really, look over a period of time to figure out what they want to do or to change in another visa classification. It's very specific to what their activity is going to be, and it has to be pretty much the same activity throughout. Another important thing is and that's why we ask them to check in with our office, is to make sure that the individual is maintaining appropriate J1 visa status before starting their activity at Penn. Okay. Um, Another thing to consider are the different policies that schools may have. Like the School of Medicine has a visiting scholar policy that you should be familiar with. If you don't know what that is, then reach out to the School of Medicine for further information. The College of Arts and Sciences has a requirement that the dean sign off on any visiting appointment or any appointment period. So again, if you're not sure of what that requirement is, or if there is one within your college, then please reach out to the dean's office to get clarification on that. Okay, remote work. This is very, very important. In June of 2023, the Department of State came out with a guidance directive that really clarified what a J1 was allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do as far as where they are located. So full-time remote is not allowed in the J1 program, whether that's in the United States, outside the United States. They must be physically present on the Penn campus at least 3 of the 5 workdays per week. Again, that is put forth by the Department of State in a guidance directive. Likewise, if they are going to be, going outside the United States for any period of time, if it's less than 30 days, that's fine. But if your aggregate number is going to be they're going to be outside for more than 30 days, then that's something that's going to have to be reported to ISSS through IPEN so that we can look at it very closely because again, any departure for longer than 30 days can be construed as discontinuation of your J1 program and grounds for us to end your sponsorship. There really has to be strong evidence that we would work with you to decipher that the person is going to be outside the United States conducting research that is pertinent to their J1 program. Okay.
Irene, I want to just jump in here for a reminder for everybody. We've we noticed this was a couple of years ago, but we had a couple instances with our Penn departments having a scholar or a professor come in to the U.S. They get onboarded at Penn, they get their payroll set up, I-9, all that stuff, and then they were physically outside the U.S. Then they left again after a month, and we're not going to be back here until the next semester or something. And that is not how J1s are supposed to work. And we did, this was just kind of uncovered by accident that the person was out of the US. So that is not a viable use of the J1 program. If you're coming here for a year, then you're going to be in the US for that year. I mean, okay, you go out to a conference and you come back. That's normal travel. Or, you go out to I don't know, your sister's wedding for a week and you come back, normal, but not using a J1 scholar to onboard someone and then the intent is for them to work remote for the next, 6 months. That is not the proper use of J1 program. So I just want to throw that out there, that this has been done before at Penn, and that is not the right way to do it at all. So
And just to underscore that last bullet, scholar must be predominantly in the US. So we always get that question, well, how long can I be outside the US for? And there really isn't a magic number. I mean, more than 30 days, we have to review it. But again, even if it's a research project that brings you outside the United States, before you undertake it, it has to be reviewed by our office and approved by our office. But again, the basic premise of the J1 program is that you are predominantly in the United States. And Jeremy said it before, you have to be in the United States to be exchanging, right? You can't be in your home country um, and participating in the J program because you're not meeting Americans and meeting people on campus. Okay, what the J1 may not be used for. I mentioned this earlier, staff positions, academic or non-academic, tenure track or tenured appointments, trainees, medical trainees, professionals, no clinical activities. So, if we have people at the School of Medicine, if they want to do clinical fellowships or clinical work, they have to go under ECFMG J1 sponsorship or an H visa. They would not be eligible for Penn sponsorship as a J1. If there is going to be incidental underscore 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 patient care, then there is separate paperwork that is required for that as well. Okay, some documents requirements. So when submitting an application, just be mindful of the fact that anything that is not in English must be accompanied by a notarized English translation. The logic being, if we're ever audited and we have a document in, Mandarin or Persian or Arabic, we're not going to be able to, I'm guessing an auditor wouldn't be able to review it unless they're fluent. So again, everything has to be accompanied by an English translation if it's not already in English. Any funding amounts and documentation have to be um, indicating the dollar amount. If it's not in US currency, it needs to be accompanied by a currency converter statement so we can have a better sense of that. And then the department confirmation form, just make sure everything lines up. So the IPEN record, the appointment letter, the department confirmation form, all the dates should line up, as should all the funding amounts and funding sources. Okay. And last but not least, make sure all the funding, support letters, contracts, appointment letters, everything have to be signed and dated by the appropriate authority, the person who has signature authority. Some housekeeping, just remember that minimum funding requirements for this past year has been increased, and this is actually has gone up. I'm sorry, we have like the wrong slide up there, but it should be,
yeah,
I think, 34,089 now per year, and the monthly amount is 2890, I believe, or 2809.
yeah.
So sorry about that. That has gone up. Likewise, if it's a postdoc, their funding level has to match that required by the university, and that information is posted on the postdoc website. Um, Jeremy, do you want to go over this one?
Yeah, yeah. So for English language requirements, one of the J1 rules is that any of our scholars or professors who are coming to visit us have to be fluent enough in English that they can effectively participate in their program. And we have a couple options here for to have some objective measurement, like things like the TOEFL score, or using the Penn ELP test, and that's with our Penn ELP department down in Bennett Hall, and they can help with that. And we're in the midst of updating this across iPen and across our website. And we literally had a call this morning with ELP about just this topic because we've noticed over the past, say, maybe 18 months or so, we've had a few incidences of scholars arriving in the U.S. That are not are really struggling with their English. And we had one of them that was actually questioned by Customs and Border Protection. They called ISSS and they said, you know, what are you doing with this guy? How can this guy be a scientist at your university if he doesn't even understand simple English to enter the U.S.? And that particular scholar, unfortunately, we ended up sending him home after about a month because we said, well, you know, sorry, your English is not good enough. So we really want people to work with either the TOEFL test or um, things things like that or the ELP. And if their English is not good enough, then they're really not qualified to be a J1 scholar. So please keep that in mind. So Lauren, I see Lauren's question here. If it's a student who's on J1, um, are they
J1 student in their home country or J1 student here?
yeah, Lauren, you can talk, Lauren, if you want. You don't have to stay muted.
Yeah, we don't have this happen very frequently, but every once in a while we'll have a student who is on a J1, so they would be coming in. My understanding is we would be sponsoring them as a J1, but they are primarily a student. So I can't
Yeah,
recall the last time this has happened, but I just wanted to
right.
flag it to know whether or not TOEFL is the only accepted exam because we accept others for admission, and so they might not
Right.
have
So
taken
if
it.
they were, I think I would say if they were admitted as a Penn degree seeking student, right? They're going to be a PhD student, for example, at Penn Design, then they would have to pass whatever admissions requirement you guys have. And it's probably could be maybe a Cambridge exam or TOEFL or something. That J1 students are a little different animal than J1 scholars. So
Okay,
there's
I thought the
there's
Different.
scholar
difference.
title just applied to the J1 category, so I
It
just wanted
does.
to make sure. Yeah.
Research scholar is a category of the J1 program, as is a J1 student. So they might be a student in their home country, but they're coming here just to do research. Then they're going to be coming in not as a student. If you're in the student category of the J1 program, you are enrolled in a degree seeking program at the university. It's not to do research. So it gets a little bit confusing because people
It is
use it
confusing. Yeah, because
interchangeably.
they may be, for example, they may be a PhD student in their home country in the UK, but they come here for a semester to do research. So for our purposes, for inside the US, they are a J1 research scholar, and maybe at Penn, their Penn title is also visiting scholar. They're not our PhD student. Their PhD is at, University of Edinburgh. Okay, they're not going to graduate from Penn. So it does get a little weird, but I hope that I hope that helps. Okay, keep
Well,
going, Lauren.
it sounds like what you're saying is our admission requirements, so it doesn't seem like it's so strict that they only accept one thing they
Right,
take. Okay.
right, right.
All right, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, I can go over this, Jeremy.
sure.
So again, the health insurance requirements that I mentioned earlier, this is a strict regulatory requirement of the J1 program. All J1s and accompanying J2 dependents must have insurance that meets the mandated levels of coverage per the J1 regulations, and that's that middle section where it says must meet the following. So they have to have insurance that meets all of those requirements. The postdoc plan offered by the university does, but if they are here as a visiting scholar, a visiting student, then they have to either purchase the Gallagher Health Insurance Plan, which is the vendor we have contracted to help with our insurance coverage, or if they have alternate coverage from their home country or have purchased elsewhere, as long as it meets the requirements, and Gallagher again would be the ones that make that determination, that's fine. But to be physically present in the United States as a J1 or J2, they have to have that level of coverage. And as it says, willful violation is cause for program termination. So uh, we have to be very mindful of that. We get a list from Gallagher twice a month of individuals who have not yet purchased or submitted information to Gallagher, notifying them that they have alternate insurance. So I'm sending out probably between 40 and 50 emails a month to chase down some of these J1 exchange visitors, asking them or telling them, doesn't look like you've purchased it yet. So again, all this information is made clear to the J1 in their pre-arrival email, in their post-arrival email. It has links that they can use where they can purchase the insurance. So you as the BA are also being shared with this email information. So just if you can, please make sure they are mindful of that, because it is a regulatory requirement of the J1 program. Jeremy, you want to talk a little bit about this? I have a tickle
Sure.
in my throat.
Sure. Yeah, so you might have, most of you, especially our science folks, might have heard of something called export control. And this doesn't just apply to, Irene, go back a slide or go forward a
Oops,
slide.
sorry.
Export control is where our faculty have to sign off on that they are not sharing technologies and commodities beyond what might be normal for U.S. National security. And this is not something that is really it's not under ISSS, except we require the paperwork that you have like verified the export control for this individual that's coming in and whatever their lab is or whatever they're doing. And if there are questions about that with the professor and the incoming person, you really need to talk to the export control office, which is a separate office under VPR. I think it's Vice Provost for Research office is where Jessica Buchanan is. And there are some cases of this. There was like that chemistry professor a few years ago at Harvard that went to jail because he was exporting technology, apparently. And so encourage your faculty that they really got to be careful with what they're signing off on, because it does get checked sometimes. And again, we don't know all the rules for this, but the export control office does. And if you have any doubts in your department or with your PI, you better check. So yeah,
Okay.
it's a thing.
So for purposes of sponsorship, the ISSS at UPenn has been designated by the Department of State that we can sponsor individuals in these categories: professor, research scholar, short-term scholar, student intern, and specialist. So J1 students are a different category. Again, those are individuals who are enrolled in a degree-seeking program at Penn. So this presentation doesn't really go over them. So let's proceed. And so for J1 professor research scholars, again, this is directly a quote from the regulations. They're here to engage in research, teaching, observing, consulting in connection with a research project and lecturing. So currently they have, they're supposed to be here for at least a minimum of 3 weeks, a maximum of 5 years. They cannot go beyond that 5-year limit currently. And, we've had some cases where individuals are coming in and they're just kind of like, really don't seem to have a research topic that they're planning to undertake. And that is a requirement to be a research scholar, that there has to be some sort of bona fide research project that they are going to be undertaking. So be mindful of that. Alternatively, the J1 short-term scholar is for a maximum visit of 6 months. So they can be here under J1 sponsorship from 1 day up to 6 months. They cannot be extended beyond 6 months. That's where the cutoff is. It's basically an abbreviated version of the research scholar program. They're here to do research or teach. Um, and again, as the last bullet says, they cannot extend their stay beyond that 6-month limit. Some important things to remember about the J1 short-term scholar. They really shouldn't be doing back-to-back visits for the same activity, so that you don't want to see them for fall semester teaching a class in, Anthropology 101, and then coming back in January to teach another course on Anthropology 101. That's not the purpose of the short-term activity. Or scholar. It's here for a brief period of time. Again, go back home, share with your fellow countrymen what you gained in the United States and as far as insight to the American culture or the skill set you learned, but then to bring that back to your home country. It's also not to be used for research scholars who may have maxed out on their 5 years and they're like, oh, but they just need to finish up something. They just need an additional 6 months. That's not something we would be able to entertain sponsorship for as a short-term scholar. And again, multiple stays in a row cannot happen. We can't sponsor those. The J1 student intern, the big thing to remember about the J1 student intern is that they have to be enrolled in a degree program in their home country. They're coming to the United States to do a research activity that is a requirement for graduation from that program in their home country. It's really used predominantly for individuals who are getting their bachelor's degree, because again, J1 research scholars and J1 short-term scholars have to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree. So J1 student interns don't have to have a bachelor's degree, but they would, at a minimum, have to be seeking that degree or participating in that degree in their home country. And again, the internship that they would undertake in the United States would be towards fulfilling that activity for graduation in their home country. It can be J1 student intern can be up here for a maximum of 12 months per degree level. Has to be included as part of the application process, the student intern placement agreement between Penn and the home institution's office. Has to be mutually signed. And as I mentioned earlier, it's more useful for undergraduates who have not completed a bachelor's degree. Okay. So 24-month bar. I am not going to dig down deep in the weeds for this one because it can be very confusing. Suffice to say, the 24-month bar precludes someone who has been from coming back in the J1 research scholar and professor category if they've already been here as a research scholar and professor within the previous 24 months. So if someone is here, I think there's an example on the next screen. So if someone is here for until December 31st in the J1 Research Scholar Program, then they depart the program, they go back to their home country. They are precluded from coming back in the Research Scholar Program for 24 months from their date of exit. So if they left on December 31st, 2025, they would be ineligible to come back as a research scholar or professor category until December 31st, 2027. Okay. The 12-month bar is a little bit different. That is, again, it affects you if you want to come back to a research scholar or professor in that category. But you look at in the previous 12 months, have they been in any other J1 category for longer than 6 months in the preceding 12-month period? Again, this gets really confusing. That's why I said at the beginning of the presentation, like, what is their immigration history? We really need to know specifically if they've been in the United States previously as a J1. If so, when, for how long, and in what J1 category were they here? Because that will help us better inform what we can sponsor and what we cannot sponsor. Okay. Jeremy, do you want to go over this part or you want me to continue?
Yeah, I can chime in. I can
Okay.
chime in now. Um, yeah, sure. So So we really need departments to try to make their J1 request to us, really at least 90 days in advance. Our minimum processing time is 3 weeks. So we know that you often get a request from your faculty, where they come to you and they say, hey, I want this guy to get here in, I want him here in 2 weeks. Just get him here, right? And you're the administrator. You're kind of caught in the middle. So it takes time for you to gather the info and submit it all in IPEN and do all that stuff. So really think minimum of 3 weeks, but more like 3 months in advance if you can do that, so that we have time to process it and the person can get their visa in their home country and then arrive here. You have to submit it through IPEN. I imagine most of you are familiar with that. You have access to IPEN, and you can input the info, and we'll generate the DS 2019, and then we'll send it to the student. Okay, next slide. Um, so we send the forms back by email to the scholar. Um, Sometimes if people have trouble with J1 or with IPEN, and this could be a technical problem or a technical issue. One of the things that we really encourage with the use of IPEN is use Firefox as your browser, and like make sure you clear your cache if it's not letting you upload things. Sometimes you've got to go out, close out, restart, try it again with Firefox, and it'll work. That's just some IPEN troubleshooting there. Um, J1 scholars can transfer from one university to another. So they might be a J1 at Drexel this semester. They're doing research at Drexel, but then in January, they're going to switch to Penn. And they can do that also through IPEN. The department would uh, submit the request, but you would check the box of J1 transfer. They're not brand new, they're at Drexel and they're just coming over to Penn. So that's a possibility. We also transfer J1 scholars to other schools in the US. So they might do a year at Penn and then they do a year at Temple, for example. Um, and if anybody leaves early, please let us know. And you have the J1 verification e-form in IPEN, but you can also certainly your case will be handled by somebody specific, whether it's Irene or Tracy or Charmaine, and you would want to drop us an email and say, hey, our scholar is leaving on September 30th. And they were supposed to stay till December, but the research is done and they're going home. So make sure that you let us know.
I can go over this one,
All right,
Jeremy.
go ahead.
So this would be for first initial applicants for the J1 program, okay? This wouldn't be necessarily for extensions of J1 sponsorship. So this is first time entrance to the J1 program. So once we send them the DS 2019, it will include instructions. They'll need to pay the CVIS fee online to the Department of Homeland Security. They schedule an appointment at the U.S. consulate for their interview. Hopefully they are successful in getting that visa stamp in their passport that is issued by the U.S. consulate, and they are allowed then to enter up to a maximum of 30 days prior to the start date on their DS 2019 form. That allows them to, prepare, find housing. They should not start their activity at Penn, however, until that start date of the DS 2019. They will be notified that they can do their arrival submission in IPEN. And if there's a change in their start date for any reason, if they want to start a little bit earlier, then we would need an updated appointment letter to reflect that. If for whatever reason they're going to be late, then you as the BA, the department representative, can submit in IPEN a late arrival notification. And then we can take the action of amending their CVIS record and subsequently their DS 2019 form to reflect a later start date. Um, U.S. consulates abroad, the processing times, especially these days, can vary. So we try and issue the DS 2019s well in advance, so it gives them plenty of time to schedule an appointment at the U.S. consulate. If there is, some reason why they absolutely have to be here by a certain date, each consulate has its own process to request an expedite. The scholars would need to, reach out to those consulates to find out what exactly is involved in an expedite request. At the end of the day, this is what a visa looks like. We've obviously removed a lot of the information for privacy purposes, but remember that the visa only controls your entry to the United States. What's more important while you're in the United States is that having a valid DS 2019 form, you're participating in the activity for which J1 sponsorship was granted. But you can be in the United States with an expired visa. Again, the only time you need a valid visa is if you are physically outside the United States and wish to enter the United States in J1 visa status. So upon arrival to the United States, we send them emails, just reminding them to do the arrival check-in online in IPEN. Once they've done that, our office will review it. We'll validate their CVIS record. So their CVIS record will go from initial status to active status. At that time, we will also issue an amended or updated DS 2019 form that is also travel validated at that time. If they are getting paid by the university and don't already have a social security number, there is a point in their arrival information that they can request a letter from our office that they can then use to apply for a social security letter. The 2-year home residency requirement, there have been a lot of changes with that, especially if you go by that last bullet. Last December, the Department of State removed a whole bunch of countries that have a large population, for Penn at least, India, China, Brazil. So they're no longer subject to the 2-year home residency requirement. Basically, what the 2-year home residency requirement says is if someone is indicated to be subject to this rule, and only the U.S. consulate will make that determination, then before they are eligible for a change of status for an H visa, K visa, L visa, or the ability to change status within the United States, they have to go home for a minimum of 2 years. They have to fulfill that obligation. So it differs from the 24-month bar. This is where it gets confusing. But an important thing to remember is that if someone has applied for a waiver of this 2-year home residency requirement through the Department of State, meaning they don't want to be obligated to go home and are applying for a waiver of that obligation, once the Department of State makes that recommendation, then our office is no longer able to extend their DS 2019 form beyond its current date. So anyone who is subject that comes in being subject to the 2-year home residency requirement, and this is an example of kind of what it might look like if someone is subject, in addition to showing it on their visa. Then if they have any questions about how applying for a waiver could affect their ability to remain in the United States, they should reach out to our office for a consultation, and we can kind of walk them through what it would mean if they apply for and receive a waiver, because it can have lasting effects and affect our ability to extend out their J1 sponsorship. So this slide attempts to kind of talk about the difference between the 24-month bar and the 2-year home residency requirement. Again, the 24-month bar only really applies if you are going to be coming to the United States to be in a research scholar or professor category. And the 2-year home residency requirement is not everyone is subject to the 2-year home residency requirement. It really depends on whether you are receiving government funding, either from a U.S. source or your home country government source, or your activity is on something called the Department of State skills list. So again, if anyone wants further information or J1 wants further information, they can reach out to us as well for further information. Some reporting requirements that are required by regulation are as listed here. You know, if they're going to be finishing up their program early or withdrawing from their program, as Jeremy mentioned, make sure you notify us of that. In IPEN, you can use the edit feature to indicate what the new end date is going to be. What I mentioned earlier, you know, anything that is more than 30 days in duration outside the United States can be construed as discontinuation of the J1 program and grounds for ending their program. So again, anything that's possibly going to take them outside the United States for 30 days or longer needs to be brought to our attention so we can review what exactly is being requested. If they're going to be late coming to the United States for their initial appointment, the first time in the US, then they need to have you as their program or edit their DS 2019 form or their IPEN record to reflect what the new date's going to be. Another regulation is while they are in the United States, if they have any changes to their US address or phone number, email address, they have to update IPEN. It's very important that they do that because that information then we push forth into the Student Exchange Visitor Information System. And that is, again, a regulatory requirement that they are constantly notifying us of any changes in their contact information. If any J2 dependent departs the United States permanently before the J1, that's something that needs to be reported to us as well. Finally, any incident or allegation, such as hospitalization or legal issues. And then the big caveat, anything that could bring notoriety or disrepute to the J1 program, that has to be reported to us as well. And there's a form on our website about notifying us of any incident or allegation. And the Department of State has actually expanded it this past year to include many more issues, you know, anti-Semitic accusations, things of that nature. So again, further information is on our website about that. So we're living in different times, so everyone has to be more mindful. Verificate. Sorry, go ahead.
Another, yeah, no, I was going to say another note on the incident report. We we don't always know. This is where we need to enlist the help of our departments out there because Penn is a big place, so we don't always know what our students I'm sorry, not our students, but our scholars are up to. So we've had some incidents where a scholar was hospitalized or something happened to them. We had a guy get mugged on the L, okay, and they filed a police report, things like that. It was not the J1's fault, but it was still a quote incident in the United States. So we, as an institution, as the whole university, we are really obligated to make a report. ISSS are the folks that make the report, but we need our institutional contacts out there, which is all of you, to bring these things to our attention. And we made sure the scholar was okay, things like that. But we had to make a report because there was a police report filed due to the incident on the subway, et cetera, et cetera. So if you hear of those kinds of things, please reach out to ISSS. I don't know, our scholar. It's true. We've had it happen. We've had scholars get hit by cars crossing Chestnut Street. Okay. And that's why they got to have the insurance, but we also need to know so we can help them. So if you hear of these kinds of things from your postdocs or your lab or whatever, please alert us so we can assist.
Okay. So you are sent periodically emails reminding you to complete the verification, the scholar verification. Uh, this is really important because you're kind of our eyes and ears into the departments. We have to make sure everyone is accounted for. Sometimes we hear after the fact that someone may have left and departed the United States 2 or 3 months ago, which again, for our role and what is required by regulations, we have to know earlier if someone has departed the program or had any issues. So be very mindful of when you get those emails to respond to them. Occasional lectures or consultations. J1 research scholars are allowed to participate or provide services like a one-time event. This is not like repeatedly like teaching a class at another university for a semester, but a one-time event. You know, they're presenting their research at a conference at another state. They're going to receive an honorarium, or they're going to receive reimbursement for their travel expenses. That is something that would be treated as an occasional lecture or consultation, like 1 or 2 days max. It's again not something that is a repeated, like every week they're going somewhere to do the same activity. It's a one-off basically. So any activity has to be notified to our office in advance of it happening and being approved by our office in advance of it happening. Because if we are notified after the fact, then and the person's been paid, then they basically have been working without authorization, which again in this day and age is something that you do not want to be have oversight of. It's just we're living in different times, so again, very important that we're notified prior to any activity.
So this, Megan and Nicola, this is what you were asking earlier in the chat about, about 30 minutes ago. So I just want to call your attention to this when you asked about can they go give a lecture they're going to go up the road to Princeton to give a lecture. So this is the occasional lecture or consultation that they can do, and they can get the money, but they have to have the permission in advance before they do it.
Yeah, and this is something that they would initiate in their IPEN record. The department representative does not do that. An extension, just everyone needs to be mindful of the end date on the DS 2019 form. Again, we need that at least ideally 3 to 4 months in advance, but the sooner it can be, no more than 6 weeks out is ideal, just to allow our office time to review the application, especially if it's missing pertinent information and we can't approve it and we're getting close to the deadline on the DS 2019. It just adds a whole new layer of anxiety and angst that can be prevented by submitting it earlier as opposed to later. Once someone's DS 2019 has expired, then it's too late. We cannot extend their sponsorship. So that's why it's very important to be very mindful of the end date on their DS 2019 forms.
And
Uh,
they've got to know it too. I mean,
yeah.
we can only do so much as the administrators. The individual they got to pay attention to their dates, and they've got to ask us before they expire what the plan is. Are they going home, or are we going to extend them? They need to have a plan. So
Mm. And as Jeremy mentioned earlier, we can sponsor individuals to go from the University of Pennsylvania, transferring to another university or J1 program, as long as their overall program intent is going to remain the same, so that if they came in to, research the atom on a flea, that's what they're going to continue to do at the new institution. They can't change categories. So if they came as a research scholar, they have to remain as a research scholar. If they're transferring into a program, that time they've already spent as a research scholar, short-term scholar, will count towards their overall time in the United States. So they cannot exceed that maximum length of stay. There cannot be a gap between programs. So if their current sponsorship expires November 30th at Penn, but they want to start the program January 1st at Temple, that's not something we could entertain. Either Penn is going to have to extend them for a month, or Temple is going to have to move up their start date to December 1. There cannot be a gap between sponsorship programs. And then there is a way that if someone is at, the Department of Biology and wants to transfer to a different department within Penn, again, as long as they are maintaining that original program objective, there's further documentation that we would need to see. But if it meets all the standards, then we could entertain that as well.
And sometimes they go from biochemistry to chemistry. Like that's probably going to work. And it could be two different departments at Penn, but if the PIs, the two professors, can explain it in layman's terms that, it's the same kind of chemistry, but the grant, we're going to move the lab to the chemistry department versus biochem, or vice versa, like that's okay. Like we can make those kind of changes, but they want to change from chemistry to teach Spanish because they happen to be a Spanish speaker. Like, no, they can't do that. It's got to really be in there, whatever their category is.
So, as I mentioned earlier about, absences outside the United States for more than 30 days, again, that would have to be reviewed by our office to make sure what they're doing outside the United States is still part of their J1 program. Um, any absences, if someone's, on FMLA, is going to go out on FMLA, things of that nature need to be reported to us, so that we can review the activity. Again, the whole premise of being in the J1 program is that you are actively participating in that program for which you receive J1 sponsorship while you're in the United States. So anything that is going to stray from the individual doing that needs to be submitted to ISSS for a review. Likewise, if someone's going to be outside the United States for more than 30 days to work on their J1 program, they have to do field research in whatever country, and they're getting paid by Penn. Global Support Services also has a portion that has to be completed by the department and the J1 to get approval for that as well. And we work very closely with GSSS on activities that bring a J1 scholar outside the United States for 30 days. So both of us consult each other, both departments consult each other, work very closely together on it to make sure it's something that we can entertain jointly to support the J1 in their activity. Some information about the J2 dependents. We have a section on our website about that. So by definition, a J2 is a spouse and unmarried children under the age of 21. So, legal partners, common law marriages cannot qualify as a J2. They can either come initially with the J1, or if they get married later or want to come later, we can entertain that as well. The J1 will have to show sufficient funding to support any J2s. That would be for the spouse, 6,000 a year, and for any child, each additional child would be 4,000. They are bound to the same regulations as the J1, including the 2-year home residency requirement, the bars, and also they have to have that insurance level that I had spoken about previously. They are eligible to apply for work authorization through USCIS. But as it says, the money that they earn cannot be used to support either the J1 or really themselves. It has to be used for, recreational purposes only. It can't be used to pay rent, to pay food, for clothing, that type of thing. And finally, they have to reside at the same address as the J1 in the United States, meaning if they get an EAD card, they can't, move out of state or to a different city because they got a job. They have to, the whole purpose of them being in the J2 status and being in the United States as a J2 is to accompany their J1 spouse. Finally, is their departure. They're allowed 30 days after the end date on their DS 2019 form to depart the United States. During this 30-day grace period, they aren't supposed to be participating in the J1 program. It's basically a benefit provided by the government to allow them to pack up, tie up any loose ends, and prepare for departure. And then if there are any changes prior to the conditions of the J1 scholars stay at Penn, just make sure you're reaching out to ISSS. And that is it. I'm sorry I was rushing so much, but we were like over time and we don't even have time for questions. Or maybe a couple.
We have time for a couple questions.
Okay.
Marilena and I have to move on to a different meeting, but
So
we've
do
got
I.
maybe
I'm with you.
we got maybe 5 minutes for questions because our meeting is at 4:15. So Irene, if you need to go, then you can go.
Well, I'm in the same meeting as you.
Oh, you are. Okay, let's
Yeah.
give it 5 minutes then. Okay, Nicola, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Irene, and thank you, Jeffrey, for your answer to my question. I have some follow-up questions. When we apply for the J1 and the J1 scholar is coming with family, we need to apply also for the J2, or is it just one form? And the applicant.
The
It's
J.
just
Sorry.
it's
No,
really just one. It's really just one form that when the scholar does their part, then they have to add the J2 information in the scholar part.
So
Not
we don't need to add to do anything else.
right? Not you. No, but the scholar does. The scholar has to add it. Yep.
Thank you. Maybe Irene already mentioned this about the with the last one of the last slides, but I wanted to be sure I understood correctly. So let's hypothesize to if the situation which the J1 scholar is called back to his country for an emergency, can the J1 scholar go back and come back to the United States after the emergency has been solved?
I guess it depends on how long that emergency is. If it's, again, we would have to look at it on a case by case basis. But, an absence of outside the United States for more than 30 days that isn't related to doing research overseas, that is, that would be difficult for us to continue sponsorship. But obviously, we're going to look at it on a case by case basis.
Does it change, Irene, between 6 months scholar, short J1?
It's the same premise. You're supposed to be in the United States, and even as a short-term scholar, I don't think the 30 days it might even be shorter. But again, the whole premise of the J1 program is that you're going to be predominantly here. So when people start saying, well, what about 31 days? What about 32 days? It's like predominantly in the United States. We understand emergencies happen, obviously.
I was referring specifically like a family emergency or something had happened during the time in which the scholar is here is called to be to be back in the family to his own country. So what is the length? But you answer my question. Finally, there are banned countries that are not allowed to apply for J1. The country that the government does not recognize.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bar going on right now, like Iran. It's not just for J's, it's for all visas. There's further information on our website about that, like which countries have bars to visa issuance.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anybody else before we go? One more. If not, you all know where to find us. Irene and I and Marilena are at ISSS, and we're here to help you with J1 issues. So thank you very much for attending.
Jeremy,
And,
where are you now? What is the new the new office?
oh, our new office. Well, it's been 8 months now, but we're in we're at 40th and Walnut. We are upstairs from the McDonald's.
Thank you.
We're in the McDonald's building. Okay, we're on the fifth floor above the McDonald's with
3935 Walnut Street.
Yeah, I do. I remember the last meeting that you mentioned about that, but you were about to move
Yep.
to the
Yep.
location.
Okay.
But
Thank
we
you.
have a very nice office. Come visit us anytime.
Should I bring a McDonald's with me?
That's right. That's right. You go. You
Get a
get
Happy
in.
Meal.
Yep. All
Thank you
right.
so very much.
All right.
welcome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.